Hello everybody, Eric again. Like and subscribe. Here we go. Let's read about left-wing communism and infantile disorder. Left-wing communism and infantile disorder. Russian. Detskaya, Valens, Lemvezny, v. Communism is a work by Vladimir Lenin attacking assorted critics of the Bolsheviks who claim positions to their left. Most of these critics were proponents of ideologies later described as left communism. The book was written in 1920 and published in Russian, German, English, and French later in the year. A copy was then distributed to each delegate at the Second World Congress of the Comintern. Several rooms were mentioned by Lenin in the work. The book is divided into 10 chapters and an index. Lenin's manuscript was subtitled A Popular Exposition of Marxist Strategy and Tactics, but this does not apply to any edition brought out during his lifetime. Bolsheviks. Lenin argues that the Russian Revolution has considerable international significance and criticizes the leaders of the Second International, including Karl Kutsky, for failing to recognize what he thought was the international relevance of Soviet power as a revolutionary model. To illustrate their move away from revolutionary politics, he supplies a quote from a 1902 work of Kutsky, which concludes that Western Europe is becoming a bulwark of reaction and absolutism in Russia. Lenin inserts that in a war against the bourgeoisie into discipline is an essential condition. He continues by describing the circumstances that resulted in the Bolsheviks' successful assumption of state power in Russia. The third chapter divides the history of Bolshevism into the years of preparation of the revolution, 1903 to 1905, the years of revolution, 1905 to 1907, the years of reaction, 1907 to 1910, the years of rise, 1910 to 1914, the First Imperialist World War, 1914 to 1917, and the Second Revolution in Russia. It describes the changing circumstances for revolutionaries in Russia and the reaction of the Bolsheviks to them. Lenin describes the enemies of the working class as opportunists, petty bourgeois revolutionaries, which leads to anarchism, and the left Bolsheviks expelled from the Bolshevik group in 1909, whom he links with those who criticized the Peace of Brest-Litovsk. He ends by criticizing the Mensheviks, socialist revolutionaries, and members of the Socialist International, who were prepared to compromise with the German leaders in defense of a capitalist system. Left-wing communism in Germany. The 5th, 6th, and 7th chapters discuss a section of the Communist Party of Germany, which split between the writing of the document and its publication to form the Communist Workers' Party of Germany, KAPD. As an example, he takes Karl Arler's article, The Dissolution of the Party. Lenin criticized the group's anti-trade union attitude, their anti-parliamentarism, and Arler's proposal of a dictatorship of the masses as a counterpoint to the dictatorship of the party. It claims the Russian Revolution has led to. Lenin notes that the Russian Communist Party, Bolsheviks, rely on the Russian trade unions, that a reactionary labor aristocracy is inevitable, but must be fought within the union movement. In contrast to the KAPD, he holds that so long as much of the proletariat holds illusions in parliaments, communists must work inside such reactionary organizations. Lenin then compares the anti-parliamentarism of the Dutch left and that of Amadeo Bordaga. Lenin then criticizes the slogan, "No compromises," noting that the Bolsheviks had made many compromises in their history. He believes that this is using theory as dogma, rather than as a guide to action. Lenin also criticizes National Bolshevism and some leftists for not recognizing the Treaty of Versailles. Left-wing communism in Great Britain. Lenin criticized the Worker Socialist Federation's opposition to parliamentary action, and in particular to affiliation to the Labour Party, through texts written by Sylvia Pankhurst. And Willie Gallacher, he proposes that all the main socialist groups in the country should form a Communist Party of Great Britain, and that they should offer an electoral coalition with Labour, and concludes that the party would gain whether or not Labour accepted the offer. In a famous turn of phrase, he says that they should support Labour General Secretary Arthur Henderson in the same way as the rope supports a hanged man. Lenin's conclusions. Lenin concludes that in each country, communism must struggle against Menshevism and left-wing communism. He claims that communism has already won over the vanguard of the workers, but that to win over the masses, it must relate to the differences between the Hendersons, the Lloyd Georges, liberals, and the Churchills, conservatives. Despite certain defeats, he believes that the communist movement is developing magnificently. Lenin describes left-wing communism as the same mistake as that of the Social Democrats, but the other way around, one that must be corrected, and that because left-wing communism is only a young trend, it is at present 1,000 times less dangerous and less significant than the mistakes of white dictatorism. Responses to the work. Several appendices were added to the document before publication in response to new developments in Germany around the formation of the KAPD and new studies by Lenin of the Italian left. A final impetus currently acknowledged a letter on behalf of the Communist Party of the Netherlands in which David Genkoop complained that the positions Lenin accorded to the organization were only those of a minority in the group. Lenin invited Pankhurst and Gallacher to the second conference of the Comintern. He convinced them to argue for their party. By then, we named the Communist Party, British section of the Third International. He joined the Communist Party of Great Britain, the CPBSTI, to join, and Gallacher remained a loyal member. Although Pankhurst was expelled from the CBGB in 1921, but subsequently allied her remaining group with the KAPD, supporting the Communist Workers International. Hermann Gorter replied to Lenin in an open letter, arguing that the smaller numbers of peasants in Western Europe constituted a key difference to the class struggle to that in Russia. In the introduction, he stated, "It has taught me a great deal, as all your writings have done, many a trace and many a germ of this infantile disease, to which, without a doubt, I also am a victim, has been chased away by your brochure, or will yet be eradicated by it. Your observations about the confusion that revolution has caused in many brains is quite right term. I know that the revolution came so suddenly, and in a way so literally different from what we expected. Your words will be an incentive to me, once again, and to an even greater extent than before, to base my judgment in all matters of tactics, also in the revolution, exclusively on reality, on the actual class relations, as they manifest themselves politically and economically. After having read your brochure, I thought all this is right, but after having considered for a long time whether I would cease to uphold this left wing, and to write articles for the KPD and the opposition party in England, I had to decline." Legacy. Besides other contexts, Lenin's left-wing communism and infantile disorder was the basic influence on contemporary Vietnamese official ideological language of left-sided thinking and right-sided thinking. Left-sided thinking refers to dogmatic idealism, which has unrealistic conceptions of change and development. Right-sided thinking refers to conservative resistance to change, according to the Vietnam Encyclopedia, published by the Vietnamese Ministry of Culture and Information. These are the two main strands of optimism. with the former giving rise to extremism and adventism, and the latter strand being reformist and given to undue compromise with capital. Bye for now!